Alright guys, true TR-48, and we're going to do a condensate pan fan kit install today. First thing we're going to do is kind of take you through getting the kick plate off. It's magnetic, so you can just pop it off just like you saw there. Pretty sweet for true. And then you got your drip pan underneath here. This is the condensate pan where all the defrost water goes. Take really close note of how that pan is sitting in there. A lot of installers will use a strap to install the fridge and they bend those brackets. So if that pan bracket is bent, you're going to have to bend them back or get some new ones from True if it's a warranty. You see I'm pulling the pan out really carefully so we can vacuum it all out. Sometimes these things get really full and really nasty. Here's a quick snapshot of what we saw before when we came first time out to this fridge. Full to the brim, all moldy, mildewy, nasty. So we took that thing in the sink and it's a lot cleaner in this shot here. But I want you to be careful with this. People usually have wood floors and that's what this is. Make sure your blanket's up underneath there and just slowly vacuum it, clean it all out. This is the first step of this install. We want to get this pan all dried out and ready to go. We're going to slide it back in because we're not going to do anything else with this particular area. So you see when we slide it back in, we hit one of the drain lines and you have to lift that up carefully and make sure that those check valves on the end of those drains are pointed at the 12 o'clock direction with the hinge pointed at 12 o'clock and the opening at 6 o'clock, and then they will drain and seal correctly. That is very important. That's why I'm zooming in right there. Make sure they look like that when you're done with this portion. Now we're going to move on to the actual install. We're going to turn the fridge off so that we can start working with the actual fan motor. Should say off on the display. You can also unplug it at this point, but we typically at least turn it off there. Here is your condensate fan kit. Here is some components. You got your fan motor, your Wagos, and your driver. These are all important components. Here's the part number, a little close-up of the Wagos, and the actual driver is a 12-volt driver. So you have your 110-volt side, neutral and line, and then your black and red wires for your 12-volt, so you don't get those confused. Fan motor, it's magnetic, so that is something really important to note. You don't have to screw anything. You just stick it right on to whatever metal you can find, and we're going to go through how to hook all this up. Specifically, got your driver there with your wires and your jumper wires. You're going to need these when we get into hooking up the driver up at the top of the fridge. We'll cover that later. And then you also have your mounting screws for your driver. We're going to need those as well. And then you have your instructions. They are scannable instructions, so we're going to take them, and since they're in sticker form, we're going to stick them on the fridge just in case we ever need to reference these instructions again, or someone who doesn't have the instructions on their phone needs to reference them. We always put them on the fridge. So this is where I put them for the specific refrigerator location. It's a pretty universal spot for True. That's where I want them. That's how we do it here. So now I'm going to show you actually scanning the instructions with your phone. We're going to open it up and it's going to bring you right to the page. You want to download the instructions. If you're on a Safari browser, you got to scroll and hit submit and then scroll down to the bottom where you can open up the settings on your Safari browser and go to downloads. You're going to have to download and open the downloads folder. From there, I would recommend that you save this to your files and call it a specific name. So I call it this so I can find it, and now we're going to look at the instructions. So we already did the kick plate, and then you notice the fan mounting location. That is something that True says here, but I'm going to show you why we do it a little bit differently to get the most efficiency out of this fan. So I'm going to show you just the steps, kind of zoomed in for a second so you can get familiar with the directions. Fan assembly is magnetic. Here's the wires you're going to hook up to. Continues on the next page. We kind of keep scrolling down. You see the fan motor installation. That is what we're going to do next. And you see they give you some colors. They talk about you may have to remove some cabling, some bundling cables, and they give you some pictures to show you where this driver and everything's going to go once we get to that step. So they're really detailed directions. It's pretty cool from True. You don't always get stuff like this from most manufacturers. So you got it pretty well laid out here, and we're going to go through each one of these steps in the video, so don't worry about trying to understand the directions. We're going to put all of our driver and stuff that goes on top in one bucket, and our fan assembly is what we're going to focus on right now. I want to show you something interesting. This fan assembly comes in some skinny wires, and I learned this from a friend of mine who did one of these with me, and he pointed out that these wires are easily chafed with all the sharp metal underneath the fridge. So let's go ahead and make a little bit of a sheathing cover for it. And that is what we're going to do here first. We're going to go ahead and sheath these wires up just so they don't ever get chafed or anything weird that would happen with exposed wiring if some customer decides they want to pull they want to pull the drain out or the drain pan out and clean it, and they don't chafe these wires. We're going to just kind of seal them all up. Just a little bit of electric tape. Really simple but important process. So once you get to the end of that, you got your open exposed wires and your nice chafe guarded wrapped assembly. Good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and hook those wires up to the existing Wagos that are underneath there. So you see you got a yellow wire and you have a brown with a yellow stripe. Red fan motor wire is going to go to yellow. That is your positive wire. This is 12 volts, remember? So we're going to hook up the red. And we're going to close that Wago up. Do a little tug test. Solid. Then we're going to get the black negative wire on the brown with the yellow stripe. That's our negative 12 volt side. And we're going to close that up. Got that black wire. Perfect. Do a little tug test. Awesome. So we've got our connections made. And now you're going to see, instead of putting it in the corner way over there, that pan on this 48-inch fridge is way in the middle. And so what we want to do to maximize is we got to cut that wire tie that's holding those wires, and we want to bring those wires over just gently. I mean, they're copper wires. They're solid instead of stranded. As we pull it over, we get a lot more length out of the fan wiring assembly, which allows us to put that fan motor where we really want it for the maximum efficiency to keep that pan dry. We have so much humidity in Florida, these things can't keep up. There's no coil under there for heat, so the fan motor's got to be in the place to evaporate this water that builds up from the defrost system. So now we're going to get that fan mounted. You can see we're going right for the middle. We want it right in front of the drip pan, so not in the drip pan, but right in front of it. And then the air, when you turn it on and verify everything, the warding and the air should be flowing towards the back of the fridge. So if you point it that way, you'll have it right. So now another thing my friend taught me is we're going to go ahead and secure that wiring, because we don't want, if someone wants to clean the drain pan, we don't ever want it to pull out of those Wagos. So we put one zip tie right there, secures both the wires, strain relief we call it, and you got your fan aiming straight towards the back, and you're ready to go with the fan assembly. So now we're going to switch to the driver, and we got to prep a few things. So we're going to unplug the fridge power. Perfect. And then we got this rain shield here we're going to deal with here in just a second. But first, to get to that rain shield off, there's sensors stuck to it that have wires going. So we're going to take a 1/4-inch nut driver or socket and remove that screw. It's literally one screw holding this whole top in. But now we run into a challenge here. We've got these wires that are in these plastic retainers. We got to release the retainer clips. So I get a good shot in there for you to see those clips. You're going to push them in, like pull the clip. There we go. Got one of the plugs out. They're tricky. What's cool though is all you got to do, see, demonstrating that the tabs right there, that's really important. That's what's going on, and that's what's holding them in. So just be really patient, find the tabs, push them in. You'll release one side then the other, and then they'll just pop out just like that. And they'll slide back. And now you've got the ability to take your cover all the way out and set it off to the side until we're done with all the wiring. We're going to put that back later. So now we're going to focus on this harness that is going all the way inside the rain shield. It's plugged into the main computer there. That's what we just accessed. So we got to get these wires unhooked. And what's cool is True gives a split retainer. That plastic retainer is split, so you can take the wire off of the retainer and split them. So you got two sensors on here, one for the freezer, one for the refrigerator. These are the door sensors that tell it if the door is open or closed. It's kind of like a reed switch. It's magnetic. It's not an actual moving switch. So the relay does the work. So you've got to make sure that those wires go back that way, which is why I'm getting that video so close. You need to hook the wires back up exactly like that. Red, black, white, green. Two different sensors. And they go all the way up the rain shield through the harness. One's down to the refrigerator there. And then you got the freezer. See the magnets on top? So that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to use a little flathead to pop those wires off. These are just tricky in general. The plastic sheathing on the wire plugs always wants to come off instead of unplugging completely. See that? How the plastic sheathing slid off, but the metal prong's still on the board. That's just something you're going to run into. You can use a pick tool. You can use a flathead. Just kind of wiggle them off. The worst thing you can do is try to pull. You're going to pull the wire right out of the harness, and then you're going to have to redo those connections. So be careful. Rain shield. This is way easier, we found out, if you just loosen those screws and then remove it from the eyelet holes. Now you can get the whole rain shield off. And you're just going to slide it up and out. Now that you got it unplugged, you're going to grab it and lift it off very carefully. This is not a cheap piece of metal, so be gentle. Set it down gently onto your blanket, preferably. And we're going to put that back on towards the end. Now you've got all this room. You can get into here and actually see what you're working with. So now we got our driver back out with our jumper wires and our Wagos. We're going to locate the line voltage, the black wire, and the neutral wire. There's a Wago for each one that has all of them junctioned together. So we're pulling them up right now. You can literally going to find this on just about any True. You're going to see the black and the white wires all junctioned off. That's the power cord going to the black, and the white power going to the neutral going to that Wago. So now we want to find the yellow and the brown with the yellow stripe. And those are bundled all up. So we're just kind of cutting wire ties and not cutting wires. Just be careful. Just cut the tie, not the wire. We're going to kind of expose this out of the way. And this is a TR-48. There's a lot more going on this side-by-side refrigerator than some of the single-door coolers you might work on when you're doing this particular repair. This is the video I wanted to do that has a lot more going on with it so that you could see what to do when you don't have a lot of room or when you got all these extra wires. So as we're kind of sifting through, we're starting to get to what we're going to find. So you're going to find that they hooked up a fan wire assembly already to the evaporator motor on the freezer. So when the evaporator motor runs, they already wanted to send 12 volts down to the yellow and brown with a yellow stripe down at the bottom that we already attached the fan motor to. So we're going to disconnect those. So you can see I'm tracing the wires. Those two wires, the yellow and the brown with the yellow stripe, go to the fan motor in the freezer. So I'm showing you where those wires are. And then we're going to basically disconnect those wires that go down by themselves. See the yellow and the brown with the yellow stripe that goes down by itself? Those are our wires that we just hooked up down at the bottom of the fridge. We're going to take those out of this Wago. Very important step. Close the Wago back up. You do not want to disconnect anything else. Just take out the yellow and the brown with the yellow stripe. Close it and put those off to the side. Those are now the freezer evaporator fan motor by itself will run before the freezer driver was powering that. And so now we don't have to worry about interfering at all. We're going to have its own driver for this fan motor down at the bottom of the fridge. So now we got our wires, our yellow, brown with the yellow stripe, ready to go. And we need to go ahead and get this driver mounted. And we want to pay attention because we have to hook these wires up to the black and the neutral. And where are we going to put it? On a TR-48, this is where you would think you would put it first, right? So you got to be careful. There is a big gap there when it's installed. You can lose that thing. It'll drop down inside the fridge cavity there, and you'll have to pull the whole fridge out to get it. So be very careful. Not good if you drop something down there. So I'm going to go ahead and thread a 1/4 inch self-tapper screw, and I'm going to mark my hole with a little punch, like with my pick tool. It's a little screwdriver pick tool. I'm going to mark the hole location for where that driver is going to be mounted, right there on the metal. And then I'm going to drill the hole and secure the driver. So now I know exactly where to put that. If you have a marker, you can use that too. I just didn't happen to have one for this video. So now we're going to go ahead and put our screw in. So we got our driver down. We got the location marked. We're going to make the hole. True does not give you any holes for this. You actually have to put this in. So this is pretty left field for some people that expect things to already be kind of installed. True has a lot of updates to their stuff, so you really got to be ready to make some things happen. Rivets, holes, just mounting in general. You're going to mount things in a specific way, and you may have to mount them in places that just don't have holes yet. So that's why we're demonstrating that now. You have self-tapper screws. We're threading it through the driver right now, and we're going to use a handheld nut driver to screw it in because those are plastic mounts. It's really easy to break those mounts. They'll just rip right apart when you go to screw it in with your drill. So nice and slow and steady does the trick. And when you have a really powerful drill, sometimes you just opt to use the nut driver to be careful. So that secures the driver in place. And that's typically how you would do it. Just nice and easy. Secure it down. The tricky part is getting the backside in because now you can't see it. So these screws are really short. They tend to want to not stand up straight, and that creates a challenge because it's really tricky to get that thing to bite into the metal. So I would recommend that you make 2 marks, one on each mount. Have a marker or ask for one, a pen, something that you can make marks with, and then just make 2 holes after you've drawn the marks, and then put your driver right in, and you're good to go. So we got it, but sometimes it can be a little tricky, so have patience with that step. Just kind of securing it in. Now we got our driver in, looking really good. So let's move to mounting or hooking up the wires. Let's go ahead and double check. We got our wiring. DC side is pointing towards the back, and the AC side is pointing towards the front. That's how you want your drivers mounted, just like the other ones. So now we're going to get our jumper wires out, and we're going to hook up this driver. They want line voltage and line neutral hooked up to this driver. It's not going to be hooked up to anything else. So when you have a TR-48, all of those slots on these Wagos are going to be taken, so you're going to have to use your jumper. So we're simply going to find the jumper at the end. We're going to remove one of the black wires, insert our jumper in that same place, and now we have a jumper wire sticking out for our line voltage, and we're going to use one of our 3-slot Wagos, and we're going to hook that up to our jumper. When I do these, I always hook up the jumper to the middle of the Wago. That way it distributes power to the 2 on the outside evenly. In an amperage situation, that would be the best way to always do things. So now we've got our wire that we took out of the other Wago, and then we're going to put in our brown wire. Here's our brown wire right into the other side of the Wago. So now you've got your line voltage coming in, going into the jumper, into the other Wago, being distributed to both line voltage powers that are needed. Now we're going to work with the neutral side. Same thing, got our jumper wire. We got a full slot here, so we've got to take one out. Typically going to go for one on the end. And then we're just going to go ahead and hook up our other Wago, just like we did on the other one. Three slot Wago. Hook up your jumper wire to the middle. And the wire you took out is also going to go in that 3 set, but it should look just like this. You got your neutral coming in, jumping over to the new Wago, getting power to the driver, line voltage coming from the cord to that Wago, to the jumper, and to the driver. So the driver is now powered. Anytime the fridge is plugged in, the driver is powered. So now we're going to work with our low voltage side. So we've got our wires going down to the fan motor, but we've got to hook them up. Here's where things get really interesting. Normally this configuration we just mounted would work really good. The problem is this is a TR-48. Every slot is being used to power all of the components on this fridge. So we've got our wires here, but what do you think is going to happen when we try to pull them over to the low voltage side of the driver? We're not going to reach. So I actually took a minute while recording this and I called True because I'm ready to hook the wires up, but this is what's going to happen. The wires are too short. And to top it off, that driver is not going to fit where that metal box cover was. The cover is too small to mount. So we've got all this wiring here and we got all these drivers in the way. And so I had to call True and kind of talk through. This is something apparently that doesn't come up very often for them. And so we now have to remove that driver from where we just mounted it because on a TR-48, it's not going to fit there. Every other fridge I've done, the TR-30s, TR-36, like there's just a bunch of other models that we've done this on. We've put the driver right here, but for some reason this TR-48 has all these extra components on it to power all the functions, and we got to move this driver. So what I was told by True officially is as long as you mount it solidly on the cabinet, you can mount it underneath the fridge, but I'm choosing to mount it right here, right behind where the cover would basically lay, and we're going to show you that here in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up my driver wires to the brown. So we've got our black hooked up to the brown with the yellow stripe, and our red hooked up to the yellow wire going down to the fan motor that we just worked on. Should look just like this when we're done. Black and then red with a yellow. Now you have a complete circuit hooked up for your driver. Now we need to mount it, and we're going to make sure our mounted location is going to be congruent with this box. See how the box is going to lay in there? Our driver is going to lay right behind the box. Remember, this fridge isn't going anywhere. It's mounted in a kitchen. It's literally going to be solid. We're just going to make sure the driver stays put. The driver's going to be safe. It's not exposed to any harsh conditions. So it's right outside the box. There's a nice big opening on the box. So we're going to go ahead and get our screw holes marked. And again, just mark both of them with a marker. And then once you're ready, you can go ahead and use those self-tappers again and secure that driver in. It does get tricky because, again, you do not have holes here. So when you need to drill, you're going to have to make those holes either before you put the driver in or during the driver. It's a lot harder with the driver in there, and you risk breaking the plastic. So I recommend whenever you can, ask for a marker, make the holes, then put them in with a handheld or a less powerful drill. So now that we got it mounted, we're making sure we check our connections and just make sure nothing got pinched, and we're going to lay that box one more time, nice and solid. Got your connections already made, so now it's just kind of making sure the wires are clearing the back of the box. And per true, this is perfectly legit and how they want you to do it when you don't have any other room in that box. So we're nice and solid here. Everything's laying flat like it should be. I don't worry about tightening all those wires back together. They're nice and solid where they're at. Sometimes you're going to hit these fins if you're working in a tight space like this. Make sure you bend them back. If you bend any fins, make sure you straighten them back out, just like we are here. You can use a flathead really carefully. Just pull them one direction or the other. Any bends in the fins, just do your best to make sure they stay straight. So we got our box in there, and just wanted to show you how flat that all lays when you get everything the way you want it. So all the wires are kind of pushed down, pushed in the way I want them to be. And I don't really worry about tying things up, because when you pull things tight with a zip tie, you have a tendency to pull them out of connections. So just set them all, just kind of bundle them back the best you can, and they will lay flat, no problem. So I'm just kind of checking all the connections and showing you where they all lay. Nice. So there's your driver and your whole setup, looking good. So we're going to go ahead and install our box for good now. We're going to slide it back on. Got that nice big opening in the back. You can see how that lays in there. Our wires aren't bundled. They're just kind of all squeezed together. It's all solid wire. It's not stranded. So it all stays where you put it, which is why we don't really need to cinch everything up with wire ties and risk pulling something out of its connection. Stays nice and tight in the box. See, you got your retainer now. Just push it right in. Lays right in there next to the driver where we mounted it. Everything's safe. No the chafe guard on the back of the box. So we're going to go ahead and install our rain shield. So we're going to get all our tools out of the way. While we're doing this, usually before I start putting things back that make it harder to get to something, I check my work. So we plugged it back in. Since I told you we did line voltage, our fan motor now should be running. And it is running, and we verify the air is definitely going towards the back. Air should be going towards the back of the fridge. If it's not, spin the fan around. The wording in the air should be pointing towards the back of the fridge. And then you got your nice chafe guarded wiring hanging right there. Looking good. So now we got to get this rain shield back on, and we got to get the wiring back on. So we're going to bring that rain shield, line it up with the eyelet, the screws with the eyelet holes, and drop it down into the slots. And that will lock it in so that we don't have to worry about it falling off. Now it is still loose, so we are going to take and secure those screws so that if we bumped it, it wouldn't fall off of the fridge and damage the wall, the floor, or the rain shield itself. Just cinch those up. See how we didn't take the screws out? We just loosened them enough to slide it off. And that's how we're going to go back in. Just cinch them up. Now our rain shield is secured. It's just on a little hinge. We can go ahead and, before we work on that box, we're going to unplug it one more time. It's okay if that cord were to fall down. You can always reach the power cord from the box. But if you can't, then make sure that cord gets put somewhere where you can reach it easily to plug it back in. So we're going to plug back in our sensor wires. Make sure you take a picture of this before you unplug them. I put it in a video so that you would be able to reference it. But if you're on a job and you've done this a few times, you still should be taking pictures before you unplug a bunch of wires. That way you can reference it easy when you go to put it back on. So these wires are pretty straightforward. Sometimes the plastic sheathing doesn't want to go back on the metal part, so you just got to be a little patient and get them to line up, and then you can push the plastic sheathing back on. So just get the metal to line up, push the metal on, and then push the sheathing back down. And once you do that, You'll see everything lines up like it's supposed to there. Nice and orderly, nice and solid connections. So there's a reference picture right there for you, just in case you ever need to know what they're supposed to look like. True has 2 sensors on this particular fridge because of the freezer and refrigerator together. And then you're going to go ahead and reinstall the wire chafe guard, and then rework that box back into position. It should lay just as flat as it did when you were checking everything and for the driver. All right, we're going to go ahead and secure our box cover with our 1/4-inch screw. Awesome. So we got our wires, our chafe guard retainers back in, and we got our box secured, and our rain shield assemblies back on, looking good. Go ahead and plug this bad boy back in. And here is a cool little cheat sheet for you. Test mode. Let's verify everything by quick pressing down in power. You'll see a little menu that says press down arrow again. Go ahead and hit that. We're going to select the arrows to get refrigerator. I went past it, so just keep going down. Press the mode button to enter. Then go to component activation. Then the first test is the evaporator motor, so press mode to enter. Now the evaporator fan should be running in the refrigerator section, sorry. Should feel air and hear it running. That's how we're going to verify. Press mode to toggle it off, then press the down arrow. Next test is the light. Press mode to enter, turn it on, toggle it off, and then keep going through that menu just like that, verifying each test and that you could hear it, see it running, whatever the sense is that you're going to use to verify that each thing is working. The drain heater's a tough one. But typically we did not mess with anything drain heater wise, but when you mess with all those wires up in there in the board, you want to make sure you're checking all this stuff. So now I exited, and now we're going to have to go back to quick press, power and down one more time to enter, and go back to component activation for the freezer section. We're going to go through all that again. Check the evaporator motor, make sure it's running, make sure you can feel air. That's the first test. So we're going to toggle it off. You'll have the light. Make sure it's on. Toggle it off. Go to condenser fan. You can feel it. Next test is compressor and condenser fan. You want to make sure you hear all these things. And then you got the drain heater, defrost heater test. Just go through all of these, make sure that they work as much as you can possibly tell, because you messed with all those wires at that control board. It's just something we check and verify. That way you don't get that call and have to come back after you've submitted the invoice. So True gives you that way to do it. Make sure you're doing the test mode. Checking out our chafe guard and our mounting. That's how your wiring should look like after you're done. Once you're happy with that and everything looks good, go ahead and snap your kick plate back on. Wipe everything down with the stainless steel polish. Close your rain shield, and you are good to go. Good work. Thanks for watching.